Could you please tell me a bit about your life? You've gone from service user to service provider.
Yeah, I can call myself fortunate for having that experience because I've seen being part of the system and um, kind of working within the system. So that's very valuable in my kind of work in advocacy.
Can you tell me a bit about your life?
Yeah, I was actually quite a sociable teenager, rebel, if I may say. And soon after that, after school, I completed school and I started working. And a few months after that, I moved out to my own place. I was independent, everything was going very well. And then I think my first symptoms actually started with withdrawal. I didn't want to see my friends, I didn't want to mix, I didn't want to party. I just wanted to be alone. And then it kind of spiraled down and I started hearing voices. I distinctly remember my first psychotic episode where I was listening to music in my flat, like midnight. And then I heard this bashing on the door, it's the police, I must open the door. So I was frightened. And I started thinking, what did I do wrong? What crime did I commit? So eventually I got the courage to open the door and I found nobody. I went downstairs, there's no police vehicle or any sign of police. That's when I actually started realizing something is wrong, but of course I didn't know what was wrong. At that time, I never heard the word schizophrenia. I think at that time, we're talking about 1991. All we knew about kind of mental health related issues was you having a nervous breakdown. And I even didn't know what that meant. But in any way, I was working, so my work started deteriorating. I kind of was spaced out, caught in my own head, and my colleagues obviously realized something's wrong. Just as short of that, eventually I got help, and I was put on medication. At first, I wasn't told anything. They refused to tell me what's wrong, and then they said I got schizophrenia. The doctor didn't explain anything. I just had to take this tablet, this time of day, and that was it. But that didn't work. I was put on several other medications. Eventually, I deteriorated so badly that my family decided, no, it's time for me to be locked up. So I was hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. And that is why my kind of experience started within the mental health system as a service user. And over the past 4 years, I spent basically 4 years of my life in psychiatric hospitals. And what I've noticed there was severe stigma, families just kind of dumping their mentally ill relatives at hospital just not to deal with them. Patients being abused by hospital staff, both verbally as well as physically. So it was a long journey for me there. I was also 2 years in a residential facility, and I remember when I was involuntarily admitted that they told me, now you have absolutely no human rights. So I think at that time I actually gave up because nobody else believed in me. They thought, now that you've got schizophrenia, you're useless. You're not going to get anywhere in life. So I actually thought, I think it's that rebel in me. When they said, you can't do this and that, can't drive a car, can't live on your own, all that. I just thought, no, it's unacceptable. Especially the abuse part hit me hard. Decided I need to fight for people's rights. But I first need to get my own mind right, because I was so negative because of society's negativity imposed on me as a person with schizophrenia. So I got my mind right, thinking positively. I think the biggest lesson I had to learn is not to be bothered by what other people say. So my journey went on from there, and I started actually doing volunteer work in the mental health field. I've written a theatre play on my life with schizophrenia to raise public awareness. And I also started a little magazine for, kind of to promote artistic talents of people with mental illness, because I noticed in hospital there were so many people with mental illness who actually had excellent talents, artistic talents. So I proposed this idea to a mental health society, and they loved it, so they partnered with me. Eventually, they actually provided me with an opportunity and a job offer. So when I told my family and the friends that I had left, you know, apart from those who walked, that ran away, I would rather say, they said to me, don't even bother taking the job, you're not going to last 3 months. And my rebel said, no, I am going to take the job. Well, I worked from then up to now. I'm like 15 years in the field. So in my work, I started with the organization. I established a mental health care user advocacy movement, but a provincially based one, which was extremely successful at the end of the day. It basically involved empowering people with mental illness, you know, on what mental illness is all about, what treatment options, what their rights are, and where to report human rights violations. I worked there for more than 8 years, and then I got a job offer again with the national organization, the SA Federation for Mental Health, continuing with the same type of work, advocacy work, but the challenge was, a new challenge, exciting challenge, was to establish, you know, a national advocacy movement. They did have one started, but it didn't really move much. So I came in, and my advocacy work involves basically going to provinces, to communities, and conduct empowerment sessions with people with mental illness, but also with mental health care workers, because I feel they both need to understand you know, human rights and where to report it, and also about mental disabilities and the feelings and pleas of mental health care users. Apart from my full-time job, I also got involved in quite a bit of international work as well. I serve on several international boards and committees. As from this year, January, I've been appointed the principal coordinator for the Movement for Global Mental Health. So that is also a nice and exciting new challenge for me to get, you know, more into international type of work. One thing that I'm busy with is to establish a global mental health peer network, which will be officially launched in February 2018 at the 5th Global Mental Health Summit in South Africa.
So could you please share with us some of the challenges you've met along the road? Because I take it hasn't all been smooth sailing.
No, definitely not. I think I experienced a lot of challenges in different areas of my life. First of all, my family. I think at the beginning when I was diagnosed, I think their first reaction was, you know, I'm either busy with Satanism or I'm busy, you know, I'm abusing drugs, which wasn't the case, or I'm just looking for attention, or I need to pull myself together. I don't need medication, you know, I just need to get myself straight. So I had quite a lot of relationship difficulty with my family. At one point, I think they also came to a point where they say, they're trying to blame whoever, you know, it's your fault, you didn't do this, and you know, it was like blame game for some way. And slowly they kind of pulled away from me. And I think once they realized about what schizophrenia entails, I think they were also scared they wouldn't tell me things because they're scared that I'm unpredictable and they're scared of how I will react. I remember I had a motorbike at the time. My father sold it and said, no, with my diagnosis, I can't drive. They were also telling me, you know, I can't live on my own. So I was placed for 2 years in a residential facility. I just felt all my independence was kind of ripped away from me. I lost my job, I lost my car, my flat, everything. So that was quite a blow for me. And I think I was angry at the world and angry at everybody for that, for how they perceived me to be, because I also thought, you know, I'm dangerous, you know. You need to handle with delicacy. So in that terms, and also with my work, I mean, I didn't want to be medically boarded, but they insisted and say, you know, with the diagnosis you cannot continue to work. And I felt I still could. It was actually my decision to make, but yet they made it for me. Friends, on the other hand, I think you quickly realize who your friends are in tough times like this. A lot of friends I lost, you know, who was kind of scared to be associated with me because of the stigma, you know, scared what their friends or their families would think if they were befriending me. So those were the challenges that I experienced, apart from the abuse that I mentioned in the mental health system. Also, how am I life? Where am I going to go? Do I have a future? Who's going to give me a job after all this? So I didn't see much light at the end of the tunnel at one stage.
Thank you, Charlene. Just to finally to sum up, could you share with us what is it like? What are conditions like in South Africa in general for people with mental illness? Where do we stand today?
I think it's slowly improving. We had an old Mental Health Act where you literally had no rights. So there was people with mental illness involved in developing the new act. And the new Mental Health Care Act is very much human rights focused. But still where we see big failure is in the implementation of policies, you know, and legislation. We have a new policy framework for mental health, and yet we see there's no implementation of that. And the conditions are still unacceptable. You know, a lot of times it's reported that, you know, people aren't treated properly and with dignity. And there's still a lot of stigma, but even stigma attached to, you know, people, mental health care workers who are actually stigmatizing people with mental illness. And that's a big problem, because they're ultimately the ones who have to deal with these people. And they don't involve them in their treatment plan and recovery plans. That to me is, again, their independence taken away from them. Otherwise, they very disempowered. I found that there was a lot of service users who didn't know or were informed of their diagnosis, because often the doctor thinks, you know, if they have a mental illness, that their intellectual capacity is affected, that they won't understand the information, which is obviously not true. That's a problem, and they only know what tablets to take. It's not explained to them properly. So to me, there's also stigma from the professional side of things.
Yeah. So you come all the way to Denmark to join Together Against Stigma conference. What are your impressions? How do you find the conference, and what do you hope to find here?
I think I actually feel very honored to be here and to have had the opportunity to present. It's such a nice focus than the conferences that I'm used to, where stigma is normally just a small component of a program, and yeah, it's a complete focus. And we all know that stigma is probably the biggest problem within the mental health system and the field. And I think what's nice, I met a lot of people from different areas, and what was also excellent was how many people with lived experience actually participated in this conference, because it's ultimately about them. That was excellent. And the media component, because the media plays such an important role in destigmatizing mental illness and promoting mental health.